And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the insipid and puerile forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. Thank you for watching the show, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for giving me a little leeway yesterday. I had a couple of things I had to do yesterday afternoon, or yesterday morning, rather. I'm down at the county courthouse, so I appreciate the short program yesterday. Now, I'm certain that all of you are still reeling a bit from the election, and I am too. It was, by any measure, a stunning defeat. But the question is, who got defeated there? Was it conservatism? No. Or was it candidates that we had in office? You see, conservatism is backed by principles, and if you haven't listened to yesterday's podcast, please go ahead and do that. And I'll have a companion article to go along with it on the Open Range Record shortly after today's program. But the whole point of it was to point out a staggering contradiction that we're confronted with. Now we're told, and think about this: what were the main issues that the other side campaigned on in this election? Well, one of the big ones was county services, right? You remember hearing that all over the place, that we have to have money for services. Well, in fact, what the other side campaigned on was a tax cut, that the tax cut given was too much. In other words, they were advocating for higher and higher taxes, that you don't deserve to pay a small amount of taxes as possible. There was a couple candidates here in Sheridan that openly said we have to have enough money for services, which when you think about that, it translates into higher taxes. Now, that is the exact opposite of a campaign message that you would think anybody in Wyoming would run on. Think about it. When is the last time you actually heard of a candidate that said, we need higher taxes? Well, essentially, that's the argument that was made in the last election. And it worked. My friends. So what really failed in the election? It wasn't conservatism, because conservatism is backed by principles that are true, the things that built the Constitution. Rugged individualism, personal responsibility, liberty, guns, as small of government as humanly possible to handle the essential functions of government, that we should have free and open trade. But, that's conservatism in a nutshell. There's a couple other things that go with it. But the other side, as you might have expected, campaigned on exactly the opposite. That is, we need to have bigger government. Right now, there is a healthcare task force going on. In fact, yesterday, Eric Barlow came out and he said, immediately I'm setting up what he called healthcare strike force. It's a healthcare strike force. And probably what's going to come out of that is Medicaid expansion. You see, there were a number of candidates, and I've got, as you can see here, I have the mountain of mailers that was sent here. Oh, here's probably one of them right here that we could probably find exactly what we're talking about. Let's see here. No, this is the one. Responsible government with clear priorities. Conservative leadership. Not by how many fights we start, by whether Wyoming businesses, families, and communities are better off. Well, this isn't one that mentions healthcare on it, but there were Melissa Butcher, Micah Sturdivant, several of the others did campaign on healthcare that meets us where we are. I think that's the quotation that Micah Sturdivant used. But that's the exact opposite of conservatism. When government gets involved in healthcare, it necessarily has to grow. It means that it's more of your tax dollars going towards other people's healthcare, which, by the way, that's not the job of government. That's your job. And I get it. You know, healthcare is expensive. I have a type 1 diabetic. If you want to talk to me about how expensive healthcare is, we can go on for hours. But that was the campaign version of the other side, right? And conservatives lost that argument, which means that we didn't effectively make the argument. Now, we all know that, you know, that lower taxes, more personal responsibility, we all know that those are good things. And so why is it that we were not able to convince a center-right state to vote for those conservative principles? No, the answer is easy. Our messaging sucked. and I don't think that we should try to massage that or anything. The truth is, we just got out and messaged. And now the Cowboy, as I probably would to do exactly the same, is taking a victory lap. And there's several articles to this effect, but the one I grabbed was the Great Wyoming Freedom Caucus Massacre, as if this is going to go down in the history books, by the numbers. And I quote, after Tuesday's primary, the Wyoming Freedom Caucus is being gutted from about 35 members in the state house to about 10 of those likely to reach the House after the general election. About 43 say they don't align with the controversial caucus. When Wyoming's Tuesday night primary election was a bloodbath. Now, just listen to the language here. The Great Freedom Caucus Massacre. It was gutted. The bloodbath. The language is impressive. The 62-member House has 29 guaranteed new members poised to take office in January. Noteworthy upsets, including ousting House Appropriation Chair John Baer, Majority Floor Leader Scott Heiner, Gary Brown, Steve Johnson, Nina Weber, who also serves as the state's GOP National Committee woman. 27 incumbents survived the primary election and don't have major party opponents. Those who survived, all of them non-Freedom Caucus members, include Bob Nicholas, Lloyd Larson, Ken Clouston, Julie Jarvis. Notice that the Cowboy doesn't mention the conservatives that came through. For example, Jeremy Haraldson didn't have an opponent, and he was the Speaker pro tem. He's a member of the Freedom Caucus. So, there's that one. There's Pepper Ottman, conservative. I don't know that she's a member of the Freedom Caucus or not, but she came through. Dalton Banks, another conservative. And so while, yes, it was a stunning defeat, I don't know that I would call it a gutting or, when you gut a building, for example, when we built Christine's Salon, there really wasn't much in there to begin with, but there was one wall. And the very first thing we gutted the place. In other words, we completely cleaned it out. There wasn't a thing left in there before we all started building. So was the election a gutting? I would say it was a stunning defeat, but I don't know that it was a gutting. Now, will there be legislators left in the House of Representatives who are conservative? Yes. In fact, I think what we did is we took a step back 2 elections. Now, remember, maybe 2.5 elections. So remember how conservatives built their majority in the House of Representatives. It started several elections ago with maybe 6 members, maybe. 6 became 12, which became 16, which became 26, which became the big majority. So it took like 4 elections. So I think in grand scheme of things, I think that this primary election set conservatives in the House back about 2 elections. It didn't set conservatism back 2 elections. It sent the representation in the House, which I guess you could make an argument that I'm splitting hairs, but I don't think that I am, because conservatism doesn't fail. It always works. And so it's not the principles, it's not the party platform that failed. It was our messaging. It was the races that were run. We obviously did not do that effectively. And on the other side of it, we were massively outspent. Now, I know the cow pie is going to go on for months, because they did after the last election. They're going to go on for months about the campaign spending. And by the way, we're going to talk about campaign spending in just a little bit. I spent the evening and show prep putting together campaign spending in a manageable form to show you how many dollars were spent per vote. And it's an incredible number. And as you can imagine, the folks that lost, well, yeah, the numbers show they ended up spending more per vote. But there's some interesting revelations in there. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But the truth is that by and large, conservatives were outspent, not necessarily by specific candidates, but by political action committees, both national and within the state. I mean, it was a leftist alliance, the likes of which that Wyoming has not seen. And it is a result. I got chastised online by some doofus yesterday. Are you suggesting the conservatives are the Jedi? And this goes back to my analogy yesterday about the election, that what you saw on Tuesday night was kind of a version of The Empire Strikes Back. That the left in Wyoming, not this election, but the last one, got caught on their heels. And they really didn't think that conservatives were going to take power in the House of Representatives. And so they spent 2 years building and amassing money and building a coalition. And then they used it in the last election. And so they just made sure that they weren't going to lose this one. And I mean, they spent a tremendous amount of money. And on the other side, I think that there was a giant amount of hubris on behalf of some conservative legislators that we obviously did not run the campaigns as effectively as we should. And so, rightfully so, we lost. So continuing with the cow pie. Around 43 House seats are poised to go to people who either oppose the Freedom Caucus, ran against Freedom Caucus members, or who have characterized themselves as traditional Republicans, which is a known antonym to the Freedom Caucus. So now, and this is why I picked this article right here, is that sentence, which is a known antonym of the Freedom Caucus. Now, what does that really mean? What exactly are the Freedom Caucus? Well, I mean, it's a group of legislators that get together and talk about bills. And they've got a paid staffer. Okay, well, there's lots of legislators, several legislators, that pay their own staff. That's not a big deal. I mean, Mike Yin had the what was her name? His name. Well, anyway, it was the man that joined the UW sorority. I can't remember his name. I'll think of it probably halfway through the program. But he was a paid staffer for Mike Yin and the Democrats. And there have been others. Dan Zwanitzer often had a paid staffer, or many of them have interns, which I don't know if they pay their interns or not. But paid staff is not unusual in the Wyoming House of Representatives. And so for the Freedom Caucus to have one of those positions, I don't think that that's out of the norm either. That's Jessie Rubino, by the way. Great person. I really like her. So that's not out of the norm. But what it was a coalition of conservative members. And that, my friends, was anathema to the Wyoming establishment, that how dare these upstart conservatives, the Freedom Caucus, how dare they take power in the House of Representatives and start to dismantle everything that we had built. Now, the truth is, and here's one other big influence in the election, I think, is that when conservatives took power, they encountered a machine that had been building for decades. People like Steve Harshman and Lloyd Larson and Bob Nicholas, and that have been in there for a really long time, built this giant government money or taxpayer dollar spending mechanism, the Rube Goldberg machine, as Ken calls it. And then you have these upstart conservatives that come in the House and they say, we're going to dismantle the entire thing. And they take aim at one of the biggest portions of that, which is the Wyoming Business Council. And, in order to make a lot of changes, you got to push the envelope quite a bit. And that's what conservatives in the House of Representatives did. They pushed the envelope. And it was a big change to Wyoming citizens. And generally speaking, Wyoming citizens, we don't like change very much. I don't like change very much. You can ask the lovely Christine. I'm pretty resistant to things changing. And so anyway, they pushed the envelope, and it opened the door for a lot of arguments, which were, and again, think about this. The other side campaigned on higher taxes. That is, well, this 25% tax cut, and Micah Sturdivant made this argument. It's on one of her campaign flyers buried in this gigantic stack, made the argument that we have to have enough money for county services. Well, the truth is the counties already spend way too much money. There's lots of them that have a tremendous amount of your cash in reserves. A lot of counties could operate without a single dime coming into their coffers for at least a year. So they campaigned on higher taxes. How bizarre is that? And we let them do it. And again, this just goes to us, not being effective in our campaigns. And I think the conservatives got to be honest about this. We really didn't run effective campaigns, and we didn't run our the messaging correctly. And the big giant 25% tax cut, man, we should have been trumpeting that. And I'm not saying some legislators didn't, but we should have done a much better job trumpeting that, and we just didn't. So back to the cow pie. Let's see here. It's unclear how the other 9 delegates will vote. Let's back up a paragraph. 9 of those seats are poised to go to known Freedom Caucus members and allies. And this is another thing that they're going to continually hammer on. Just because you're a member, you're a conservative, and you happen to vote the same way that another legislator doesn't mean that you think exactly the same way. It doesn't mean that you're part of the same group. It doesn't matter that it doesn't mean that you're part of the same bowling league or darts team or play men's league golf. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means you happen to vote the same way. You happen to believe in smaller government. So that's not necessarily it doesn't mean that you're part of the Freedom Caucus, but that is an effective weapon that the left used against lots of conservatives, people who are not even eligible to be in the Freedom Caucus. And there's another thing, right? The narrative coming out of the left was and Ogden Driscoll hammered this throughout the campaign. Well, they all vote the same. It's statistically impossible for them not to be members of the Freedom Caucus. No, it's not statistically impossible. It just so happens that they believe the same things. You could go to, I'm going to probably get hammered for this analogy. But you could probably go to a couple of different churches and largely the same things will be believed in both churches. Okay. That doesn't mean they're all part of the same church. It means they believe the same things. It doesn't mean they're part of the same group or whatever. But that was another narrative that the left used very effectively in the election. All right, so those 9 other seats are poised to go to known Freedom Caucus members and allies. Okay, so whatever. I think that narrative is I hope that it's going to die a little bit. Probably won't. It'll probably be used against the few conservatives that are left in the House of Representatives over and over. But it's, again, we just got to do a better job at beating it. All right, so it's unclear how these other 9 delegates will vote. That split of at least 43 against the caucus, or at least 10 to at least 10, is a vastly different from the current makeup. Roughly 35 members vote in alignment with, okay, so again, it's that same stupid narrative. But here's the other thing to remember. There are a lot of freshmen coming into the House of Representatives. So pretty much the only thing you've got to go on from them right now is what they've said in the campaign. And I'll give it to them. Most of them, they are straight up redcoats. But you don't know how they're going to vote. And you never really know how they're going to end up when it comes to actually voting on legislation. It's very likely that the makeup is not going to be 43 to 10. Though, I'll admit the leftist machine in the House is pretty effective at getting their claws into new legislators. So I mean, who knows how it's going to work out? One thing is for certain. The left definitely has control of both branches of our legislature. So, I mean, that's not in doubt. The only question is how many of them are actually going to stick up for Wyoming values and how many of them are just going to go straight full-blown communist. Who knows? There's a couple of those floating around the House. Okay, so over to the Senate. Of the Senate's 31 seats, 17 were up for election. 7 incumbents emerged without major party opponents. 8 new members are guaranteed to join the chamber, and potentially 1 more. If Republican Evie Brennan loses to the Democrat, Evie Brennan is not going to lose to the Democrat. At least 15 of the 17 Senate primary elections went to races featuring only non-Freedom Caucus sympathizers. Now the word is sympathizers. So there is no Freedom Caucus in the Senate. And just because you happen to be a conservative doesn't mean that you're a sympathizer. And just think about the language for a minute. I mean, the Cowboy in particular is trying to do everything they can right now to demonize conservatives. And to convince people, well, don't vote conservative because if you do, you're going to be a sympathizer. Now, what other places have we heard the word sympathizer? It's almost always has a negative connotation to it. That you're not a conservative, you're not a Republican, you're a sympathizer. Think about it. Okay, so this is the narrative that the Cowboy and the rest of the media is going to pick up on this too. This just so happened to be the first article that I grabbed. All right, so let's see here. Abby Angelos won her race. Sherry Steinmetz is in there. Laura Pearson didn't have to run for re-election. Angelos makes her ascent to the Senate after defeating Dwayne Dillinger by roughly 500 votes. Even without Tuesday's shakeup, the Senate has not been a Freedom Caucus stronghold because there isn't one there. Because there is no Freedom Caucus in the Senate. There's some conservatives, yeah, but there is no Freedom Caucus in the Senate. Let's see here. 3 more state senators generally aligned with caucus who weren't up for election. Tim French, Troy McEwen, Laura Pearson. I mean, there's several of them. Let's see here. Some caucus members, such as Ken Pendergraft, Chip Nyman. Let's see here. So now the ones that we do know. So Representative Pendergraft and Melissa Butcher were running for Bo Beitman's seat. Now, historically, not this past session, but historically, Dennis Bo Beitman, Dennis is his real name, he generally voted conservative. Not in this last session. Last session, only 50% of the time did he side with the conservative majority in the Wyoming Senate. And so really, you trade out an effective legislator and the Senate president for somebody who's definitely a radical. Melissa Butcher believes in bigger government and abortion and all those things. So definitely a radical, but nowhere near as effective. So, I mean, definitely a point for the other side. But, really, when you look at the effectiveness, this is the argument that I made, a couple of years ago when Poison Barry Crago ran for the Senate. That, conservatives did not win that seat and didn't win in this last election. Mark Jones was, at least the unofficial vote totals say that Mark Jones lost that election by 1,000 votes. Okay, so you traded out for Marilyn Connolly. Still votes the same, nowhere near as effective as Poison Barry Crago. So, not exactly a win, but not a complete defeat in that district. So you've got Marilyn Connolly, who's basically a full-blown big government spending liberal. I mean, come on. She voted to spend $1.241 billion in extra spending. I mean, you can't spend that much money or vote to spend that much money and be a conservative. The math doesn't work that way. So I guess my point in all this is we don't really know how all of this is going to shake up, whether there's just going to be 10 conservatives in the House and 6 or 7 in the Senate. You don't really know. What we do know is that the left, the redcoats, are going to have the majority. Just don't know how that majority is going to shake out. You won't know that until we actually start voting. There's a big difference between campaigning and actually voting. And in fact, there's a piece from Tom Lubnow that kind of points that out. We'll get to that after the break. But big difference between campaigning and voting. And once you start voting, you are accountable to your constituents. Now, the only difference here is if you're a member of the left, the Wyoming media is going to cover for you. They always do. And so, like always, this program will be about the only one that's holding any of them accountable. So we're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll finish up the program when we come back. I'm going to apologize in advance. I did not redo all the ads as I intended yesterday, so you might hear a couple of campaign announcements, but let's take a quick break, and then we'll continue when we come back. The following ad was paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
This is Brent Bean, a Republican for governor. Wyoming families know what matters: law enforcement, emergency services, and supporting strong schools, agriculture, and energy production. But state government keeps growing while priorities fight for resources. That has to change. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending and priority problem. Vote for me on August 18th, and I'll put Wyoming priorities first. I'll return taxes to you, the taxpayer, and make Wyoming number one. Paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
Today's program is also brought to you by Morton Buildings. If you're in the market for any type of building for your property, you need to call Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They're the best in metal building construction, and they've been doing it longer than anybody else around. So it doesn't matter if it's a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger, like a roping arena or maybe a giant warehouse for your business. The two guys you need to call first are Marcos and Jesse. Again, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out on their website, mortonbuildings.com. Welcome back to the program. His name is Artemis Langford. Thank you, Representative Tamara Trujillo, former representative. Whatever. Did you know in Wyoming, if you were once a representative, you always get to use the title? Kind of a strange Wyoming law, but I think it's kind of cool. So thank you, Tamara, for that one. Artemis Langford is the man that joined the sorority at UW, who was also staff to the Democrats a couple of years ago. Now let's go to some of the other comments. Samantha says, I'm already being told to jump ship and get behind Barlow. If not, Wyoming will go blue. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It kind of went blue on Tuesday anyway. Now, the only possible reason for that, Samantha, is that there's a lot of folks that don't want to even think about Rebecca Vextel as governor because she's a conservative. Yeah. That's why. Eric Barlow is not a conservative. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care how many times he says it. He is a radical environmentalist, and he always has been. So the suggestion that Wyoming could go any bluer than it is right now is kind of ridiculous. And it's not kind of ridiculous. It is ridiculous. The truth is, Eric Barlow is and always has been a liberal. You don't have to have an R at the end of your name to be a Democrat. So, Samantha, I'd tell all those people that are telling you that, how much bluer could it possibly get than it is right now? I mean, you think... Okay, so before the election, lots of times I've made the argument that the Democrats in the House of Representatives and in the Wyoming legislature in general have an outsized influence. There's only 6 of them in the House, but for the left, at least last session, to get anything passed, they had to have the Democrats with them. And if the Democrats weren't with them, nothing was going to happen. And so really it was the 6 Democrats who directed the agenda of the left in the legislature. Well, now they don't have to have that. They've got the majority, and they have Eric Barlow in the corner office, or, for right now, the after the primary. We still have a general election to go, which I think there's somebody running against Eric Barlow. And this one, for a political observer such as myself, this is going to be a fascinating election to watch. And so, just because, now there's actually a challenger. Now, and I agree with you, Samantha, Rebecca better get knocking on doors quickly. Now here's another thing that I want to address. That you should never compromise your principles. This is what I was referring to at the top of the program, that conservatism did not fail. Our candidates did. Okay, we got beat. There's no getting around that. But the principles behind them never failed. When I walked into the voting booth on Tuesday, and in Sheridan it wasn't a booth, it was a table with a little divider on it, so not exactly a booth. But when I sat down, I actually thought, I was looking through all the races, and I was thinking about the arguments that I've heard, in the media, and suggesting that you should compromise your principles as some sort of strategic vote. I don't think so. You should never do that. You should vote for the person that you think is best for the job, and damn the torpedoes. That's what you should do. You should never compromise your principles. Don't vote for a candidate just because you think it's some sort of strategic move. That's one of the ways that Democrats win. Vote for Barlow or the entire. And this is like the George Bush thing. Buy a new car or the terrorists win. Vote for Barlow or it's already blue. The only difference is the letter at the end of his name. That's it. There is no other. There's nothing else. The guy is a radical fundamentalist. So to suggest that somehow not getting behind Barlow, I would laugh. Whomever told you that, Samantha, I would laugh in their face and tell them they're full of it. Let's see here. One more. Let's see here. Councilman, thank you for joining the program. By the way, Councilman Gamroth, do all of your buddies know that you watch Cowboy State Politics? Anyway, he says in 2008, Democrat Dave Frudenthal was governor, and we had 26 Democrats in the legislature, and now we have 6. Doesn't matter. They switched places. They switched parties, Kyle. In 2008, it was a very different time. But if you paid attention to Wyoming politics, as you claim to, you'll notice that from 2000, from the early 2000s on, 2009 started kind of the Tea Party movement, 2010, and the Democrats were on a steep decline. And so what happened? Well, in the 2018 election, of course, several years later, over 6,000 Democrats, actually 12,000 Democrats, switched from the Democrat Party and joined the Republican Party. This year, only around 2,000 did. The remaining Democrats, I guess. I don't know. But the truth is, most of the Democrat Party in Wyoming is already in the Republican Party. So to make that argument is, it's pretty ignorant of Wyoming politics, if you ask me. Because again, you don't have a D at the end of your name to be a Democrat. All right, let's go to Tom Love now. So he has, and this is one of those columns where there's bald-faced lies right in the middle of it, and some things are kind of true. But let's just start out here. Let's see here. This election, the voters of Wyoming lowered the boom on the Freedom Caucus. No doubt about that. They did. You heard lots of folks talk about losers about this election being the end of the conservative movement in Wyoming. It's not. It never is. Conservatism always works. Socialism only works, and that is the socialism that many of the candidates in this election were advocating for. Socialism only works so long as you don't run out of other people's money to spend. Let's see here. Wyoming was a conservative state long before the Freedom Caucus and was a glimmer in John Bear's eye. And it will be a conservative state long after the Freedom Caucus is gone. Now, let's talk about that sentence for just a second. Is Wyoming a conservative state? Yes. I think probably, after this election, it might be 55-45. Now, again, that doesn't mean that the majority of people, because there was a lot of people that didn't show up at the election. That's absolutely the truth. I've already seen the narrative. Well, this was a huge election. the truth is, the turnout was 22% below the 2022 election. So was it pretty high in comparison to the last election? Yeah. Is it a record? No. In fact, turnout was pretty weak among Republicans, which is why you got so many Democrats who can't spell that got elected. But conservatism is never going away. What will happen is you'll have 2 years of higher taxes. You'll have 2 years of big government, which, make no mistake, that's coming, my friends. If I had to put money on it, I would say one of the things they will go after is Medicaid expansion. I think that you will probably see them revisit the hate speech law. I think that's a distinct possibility. That's one we haven't heard about in at least a couple of years because it wasn't going anywhere. They will revisit marijuana. Make no mistake about that. Just about every big government idea that you can think of, you're going to see it, and they've got all of the pieces on the board to do it. And so, I mean, we should probably play like I don't know, liberal agenda bingo or something. What will they do next? We've got a couple of months, before the legislative session, so maybe I ought to set that up. So I'll get the lovely Christine is talented at making bingo cards, so maybe I'll ask her to make us a liberal agenda bingo card, and we could all just play along. I think it's a good idea. I'll make sure that I get it on the website for you. All right, so Lubnow says, let's see here. What happened to the Freedom Caucuses? They made all kinds of promises about how they were going to reform Wyoming government. They did. That's true. And when they stormed into power, they didn't take time to figure out why things were the way that they were. Now, the truth is, as I mentioned earlier in the program, that they really pushed the envelope, which I don't think was unwarranted. I think, given the government largesse that the liberals had created in Wyoming, that pretty much any meaningful change that they made, and let's be honest, the 25% tax cut would not have happened without conservatives in the House of Representatives. There was lots of great gun legislation. The ban on gun-free zones, that's out the window. So there were some big things. Election integrity. They did a lot of great stuff on election integrity. So you had to push the envelope to make any sort of dent in anything. And so I don't know that I necessarily agree with Lubnow's comment there. And he says, let's see here, property tax reform is an example. Property values in Wyoming have skyrocketed. This is absolutely true. As a result, property tax increases became a real problem for Wyoming homeowners. So the legislature cut property taxes without thinking about the consequences of those cuts. Wyoming tax system had evolved so that property taxes were the vehicle that funded local government and small communities in particular. When the cuts landed, services had to be cut with them. Libraries were closed, fire departments went short-handed, new patrol cars were shelved. Okay, so this is a load of bull crap right here. So the biggest hit to any county budget in the state of Wyoming happened right here in Sheridan County, and it worked out to 6 or 7% of the budget. That's it. There is not a budget in this world that cannot sustain a 10% cut. We did it. Wyoming sustained a 20% cut several years ago. Now, you'll hear liberals like Tom Lubnow bellyache about that from time to time. But the truth is, when there was a budget shortfall, Governor Gordon demanded a 20% cut across the board. And weird, the state is still around. The truth is, there is a lot of extra spending that happens in cities and counties. One of the things that they do is they give a crap load of money to nonprofits. Which, by the way, is absolutely against the Wyoming Constitution. But in Sheridan County, just this last year, it was in excess of $1 million. So the budget for the county, well, let's just do the budget for the city because I know that one a little bit better. So the budget for the city is a little bit north of $25 million. Okay, so that was 1/25 of the budget. All right, so you do a little bit more, cut a couple more little programs that we don't necessarily need. And you're on your way. You don't really need. I mean, the argument that counties had to cut fire departments, that's just flat wrong. Okay, Niobrara County, the cut that they took with the 25% tax reduction was $170,000. 2 pickups. That's all it is. Or a position and a pickup, or two positions, or whatever you want to, however you want to work it out. And when the 50% tax reduction passes, because I have no doubt that it absolutely will, when it passes, that 50% is only going to be about 10% of 10% budget count to counties across the state. That's it. It's no more than 10%. And so, all of this, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. It always has been a fallacy, and it still is a fallacy. But this is the one that I was referring to earlier, that in fact, the left, most of the people that won in the last election ran on raising taxes. That's essentially what they were arguing, is that you got too big of a tax cut. And so we have to elect other people that are not going to cut taxes. And how bizarre is that? Most people went for it. In Johnson County. And again, this number just, I can't get it out of my head. But Marilyn Connolly voted to spend $1.241 billion extra dollars. That's a billion with a B. And she got elected with over 1,000 votes, by over 1,000 votes. Hazard County, Johnson County, man, either A, the messaging really stunk, or B, there's a bunch of Democrats that live there. I'm going with B. So this whole idea that the county government is going to come to an end is really a bunch of crap. None of it is true. Okay, so here we go. And here he comes out and says it. Cutting taxes without accounting for the consequences of the cut was a train wreck in the making. So the Freedom Caucus, and I was against this, by the way. So the Freedom Caucus coined the term backfill to fix the consequences of their policy changes. They put forward a plan to shift taxes onto the taxpayers. Okay, so that's not. So the real argument behind that is there's over 30 at the time. There was $30 billion of your money stashed in state banking accounts. $30 billion. The whole budget for the state of Wyoming for 2 years, the one that was passed, is $11.5 billion for 2 years. So we're looking at roughly $5.5 billion for every year. And there's over 30 in the bank. So yes, you deserve to have some of your money sent back to you. Let's see here. They proposed the Wyoming savings, which is akin to spending the retirement funds to pay off gambling debts. That's not true at all. I don't think that there was a single person that said we should spend the savings account. There was, however, lots of arguments saying, look, we've got $30 billion in the bank. How much more could you possibly need? By the way, that's not government's money. It belongs to the Wyoming taxpayers. If you are taking more tax dollars than is absolutely required to fund the necessary functions of government, you are overtaxing people. Taxation, by the way, is legalized theft. Calvin Coolidge said that anything over what is necessary for the essential functions of government is legalized larceny. That is what Tom Lubnow is advocating for. And it's a narrative that worked across the state. So again, conservatives really stunk at making the argument. Let's just be and here. Okay, so let me just back up on that. Now, I don't mean to pile on to all of the conservatives that stepped forward to run for election that worked really hard. I don't mean to pile on them, but facts are facts. Okay. We have to look at, if the conservative movement is going to gain ground again in Wyoming, we have to be honest about why we lost the election. And I mean, that's pretty easy to figure out. We lost because we made some strategic errors in the legislature and because our messaging stunk. And we were overspent. And there was a coalition of leftist groups campaigning against conservatives. Those are just the facts. And, the only way that you're going to win elections post 2026 is if you confront those facts and fix them. The truth is that in Wyoming, politics works like a pendulum. The further that the pendulum gets pushed to the right, and I realize on your screen it looks like it's the left, but it's my right hand. But the further you push the pendulum to the right, When you let it go, it's going to swing dramatically to the left. And what happens? And think about this. It's easier to envision on the national level. How many times have Republicans swept into power and things have been great for a little bit, and then in a couple of years, they're swept out of power, and then the pendulum goes back and forth? That's how politics works. Now, this one was pretty dramatic. I'll give you that. But it's always going to come back. And just it requires candidates to make the argument. And it doesn't help. I mean, it doesn't hurt if the other side makes a couple of strategic blunders. Now, another big thing that Lubnow mentions in here, and let me just see if I can find it. Okay, yeah. All right, so after, and by the way, the checkgate thing, that didn't help. They used that to hammer on conservatives pretty much at every turn. And then let's see here. And then Lubnow makes the argument that it was the conservatives that said, well, we should do away with property taxes and we should just raise sales taxes. All right, now let me give you, first, before we get into this about who actually did it, let me give you the argument behind it. A sales tax is entirely voluntary, right? If you don't want to pay higher taxes, don't go buy a whole bunch of stuff. It is entirely voluntary. Now, I will argue that a sales tax is the most regressive form of taxation possible because it affects those people with lesser means to a higher percentage than it does of somebody that's actually making a good living. You hear this argument, a lot of cities and counties have a 1% tax, and they tell you, well, it's just 1 penny. No, it's not just 1 penny, it's 1%. And by the way, if you're the waitress that's got 2 kids that's just struggling to get by, that 1% makes a heck of a lot more difference than it does to somebody who's knocking down $100,000 a year. But that being said, it is also the fairest tax. That is, it is entirely voluntary. If you don't want to pay taxes on a new car, don't go buy a new car. Or buy one that's less expensive. If you don't want to pay taxes on a new piece of property, don't go buy a new piece of property. It is entirely voluntary. Okay. Now, think about property taxes. You pay property taxes on something that you already own. And by the way, your taxes increase pretty much every year. I mean, now we have a 4% cap on it, but your taxes go up every year. But generally speaking, the assessor's office values your property way more than what you paid for it. And even if you were to sell your property and realize that capital gain, you're not going to be able to go buy another one. And so, like my parents are a great example. They bought their home in the 1980s, and I think they paid like $50,000, $60,000 for it. Well, now it's valued at like over $300,000. But they're never going to sell that home. They're never going to move away from that house. And so they're never going to realize that extra value in their house, and yet they are forced to pay it continually. It is literally an unrealized capital gains. And you are forced to pay taxes on something that you already own. And if you don't pay taxes, the state takes your property away from you, which kind of means that you don't own it, right? Okay, so you're forced to pay taxes, and if you don't pay taxes, they're going to take your home from you. So the conservative argument with that is, well, okay, let's just go to a flat tax. Steve Forbes was really big on this when he ran for president. Hey, let's just do away with property taxes. Let's raise the sales tax to 10 or 12% and call it a day. That would actually decrease your tax burden. It absolutely would. Now, there were some conservative legislators that said, okay, let's do away with property taxes entirely and just focus on sales tax. Okay, now, I would say that given the political environment, that's probably not a very good argument to make. But nonetheless, some of them made it. And again, it is the correct conservative argument. But you should have had the foresight to know that that wasn't going to fly. So Lubnow claims that it was the Freedom Caucus and conservatives that came up with this whole idea. That's not true at all. It started in 2024, and it was brought by none other than Steve Harshman, the former Redcoat two-time Speaker of the House. Steve Harshman, the old coach of of the redcoats in the House of Representatives, Steve Harshman, who unfortunately is now about to be our superintendent of public instruction. It wasn't a conservative that brought this idea up. It was Steve Harshman in 2024. My friends, you've got to do your homework on this stuff. And I realize this is my job. This is what I do. But do your homework and don't buy the bull crap that's coming out from any of these redcoats. 80% of the time, what they're telling you is not true. Or if it is, it's only half true. So again, with Lubnau's article, it's chock full of just bald-faced lies. And how are you to know the difference? Well, the default position needs to be that that they're a redcoat, ergo they're lying. They're a liberal. They really are a liberal Democrat with an R at the end of their name, so they must be lying. So that needs to be the default position until proved otherwise. Now, I realize it sounds like a double standard when I say that, well, conservatives tell the truth most of the time. Most of the time they do. There are some of them, a few, who really aren't, that have told a couple of whoppers now and again. But generally speaking, if it's the redcoats first, they're claiming to be a Republican when they're really not. Okay. Look at Melissa Butcher's whole platform. It's on her website if it's still up. By the way, I should probably go save that thing. So I've got a record of it. But it's clearly not a Republican platform. I mean, elective abortions, yeah, not conservative at all. Marilyn Connolly, vast amounts of government spending, not conservative at all. But yet they still claim to be Republicans. So from the very beginning, they're lying to you. So make that your default position and then ask them to prove otherwise. Okay, let's go ahead and take another break. And when we come back, we're going to hit all of the spending. The numbers are going to blow your mind. How much they paid for your vote. Back in a minute. The calendar says that it's summer, and you believe it. Well, that's just so cute. But you obviously haven't lived here very long, have you? And you probably think that the weather is just going to continue to warm up. You don't have to worry about snow or ice or 30-degree temperatures anymore. In case you've forgotten, this is Wyoming, my friend, and that sort of thinking doesn't work here. 1 minute, it could be 75 and sunny, and 10 minutes later, snow. Whatever the weather, you need a pair of socks that'll keep your feet cool and dry even on the hottest of summer days. And if you happen to run into that freak midsummer snowstorm, trust me, it's happened. I've seen it. You'll stay nice and toasty warm. Well, your feet anyway. To get you a pair, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. These are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia,
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell. Iceland.
France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the last year and a half been more than you could bear? Well, if it has, you've come to the right place. Call my friend Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out,
back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. A record that the mainstream media, and certainly the cow pie, are never going to come close to, because my friends, they are going to take a giant leap to the left, because now they don't even have to fake it. Now they can just go full-blown redcoat, just like they all are. And what you're seeing right now from them. And okay, so in all fairness, had the redcoats got trounced in this election, I would be probably taking a victory lap too. So let's not rag on them too hard, but they certainly are right now. Okay, so one of the podcasts I did last week, it was on Saturday. The main theme of it was, how much is your vote worth? How much do you think your vote was worth? Did you go vote? And you know, most people, and here are the broad numbers. Of the 580,000 people in this state, roughly 450 of them are eligible to vote. So of all of the people that are eligible to vote, only half of them are actually registered. And of those people who are actually registered to vote, only about half of those actually do, in some cases less. And an even smaller number than that are the people that vote in the primary election. I've heard a lot of comments, you know, yesterday and Wednesday. Well, I guess yesterday was Wednesday. But I've heard a lot of comments. Well, I don't vote in the primary. Yeah, it's the general that I vote in. That's a dumb idea, because in Wyoming, as we all know, or as most of us should know, most of the elections are decided in the primary. And, you know, this year there was a tremendous amount of spending that happened. Grand total. So for the House of Representatives, just the House, there was $1.27 million that was spent in the House of Representatives. And actually, you know what? Let me just show you this. I did a lot of work during show prep just to show you how much money was actually spent. So let me just show you this little screenshot here. Where is it? Here we go. Yeah, I can actually show it to you. So check this out. This is the top 10 spenders in the House of Representatives in this election. So check this out. Let's see here, make sure. Okay. Okay, here we go. So $1.268 million total spent, with an average cost per vote of $10.37. And the top 10, the number one on the list is Donna Rice. She spent $104 per vote, and she only got 398 votes. Now, number two on the list is a little deceiving. Okay, Mike Yin, he's a Democrat, and so in the primary, he got 42 votes, which equaled $62 a vote. Julie Jarvis, and no surprise here, number three, she spent $39,374 for 685 votes. That's $57.48. And then Bill Winnie, I don't know how many times he has run for election. This has to be like 18 or 20. But anyway, he spent $47 a vote. Carlin Jones, who lost pretty heavily, he spent $46.79. Let's see here. Jeanette Ward is at number 8. She spent $31.40 for every vote. So it just gives you kind of a rundown of the how much your vote costs. Now, Donna Rice, that one's a funny one. She sent, and this is incredible, to all voters, not just Republicans, she sent little miniature kind of iPad-looking things that had a video message from her. The shipping alone on those was $7 a piece. So you open up your mailbox and you've got this video message. I mean, wow. But I can't imagine how much was spent on that. So $104 per every vote. But there were some other races that were equally as interesting. And I've got this, you know what, I should make this spreadsheet available, but I went through it. And, from some of the notable numbers, so let's go to House District 58. That's interesting. That was Bill Alamand, Peter Boyer, and there's a Democrat in there too. Bill Alamand, of course, member of the Freedom Caucus. He was on appropriations. He's the guy that had some legal trouble with the DUI. He ended up spending $26 a vote. To Peter Boyer, who spent, now this has got to be off. So Peter Boyer only reports that he spent $2,658. That's got to be wrong. There has to be a report there that hasn't been filed. Let's see here. I already told you about Julie Jarvis and Jeanette Ward. Julie Jarvis spent $57.48 a vote. Jeanette Ward, $31.40. Let's do a couple of others. Let's see here. Let's pick David Hill and Levi Assay in House District 50. That's over in Park County. David Hill spent $14.94 a vote. Levi Assay spent $7.21 a vote. And let's go a couple of the other big ones. Let's see. That's Donna Rice. Yeah, that was the $104 a vote. And there were a couple of others. But now the podcast I did last Saturday just focused on Senate District 21. That's where I live. And it was one of the larger spending races. Melissa Butcher raised close to $60,000. She spent a little bit north of 30. And if you add up, and admittedly, you got to do a few mathematical gymnastics here to get here. But I figured out that it took roughly 3,600 votes to win the election in the 2024 election. And so if you do the math, that equals out to about $28 a vote. So if we go back to the spreadsheet, let's see how much she actually paid. I didn't do the Senate. I only did the House. So hopefully I remember tomorrow and I'll get you that number. But think about that, $28. What could you buy with that? Well, when the lovely Christine and I go out to dinner, it's generally about $50, unless we go to the Rib and Chop House, which we're not fans of it anyway, so we hardly ever go there. But it's generally speaking around $50. We end up going to the Mexican restaurant a lot, and most of those plates are $22 to $24 a piece. And so for every vote necessary to win that election, that candidate could have taken you to dinner. And I don't know how long it takes you to eat dinner, but generally I figure about an hour. So if a candidate actually spent an hour with you to earn your vote, think about how different our politics would be. Just think about that. Right? If a candidate had to spend an hour with each one of the people that are going to vote for him, would it take $28 for their vote? Would it take the $104 that Donna Rice spent, or the $56 a vote that Julie Jarvis spent? My friends, our politics has moved to a place where it's just about the most money that you can spend. Now, Patrick says, interesting question, and I think this one is probably, Patrick, you probably meant this one rhetorically, was spending by AFP effective? I would have to say yes. Now, they claim in their last filing that they spent about $234,000 in this election. $234,000. Well, I know in the Senate District 1, if you go through this stack, there's a bunch of these that are from Americans for Prosperity. In fact, I think when I figured it out, I had 14 mailers from Americans for Prosperity against the 5 that Representative Pendergraft sent out. And, though none of us like to really admit it, negative advertising works. And I think that that's obvious from this election. Now, we'd like to say that, hey, positive campaigning will work, which I don't necessarily think that it does. Now, Eric Barlow, okay, let's use him as an example. At the beginning of the race, he said he's not going to campaign negatively. Now, why did he make that promise? Because Eric Barlow's done a lot of stuff in the legislature that would qualify as not being so positive. Because he knew that he would have a coalition of outside groups going after him. And there were a number of them. And to be fair, there was a lot of money spent against Eric Barlow in this election. But the question from Patrick was AFP effective? And I would have to say yes. In most of their elections, they won. Senate District number 1, they hammered Chip Nyman. And there was it seemed just from Representative Nyman's videos, it seemed like there was a new mailer just about every single day. And so I would have to say, yeah, that their advertising was work. But it wasn't only that. They had a lot of people going door to door. There was even an AFP, Americans for Prosperity person that stopped at our house. Sorry about his luck, but, hey, man, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but he didn't enjoy that very much. But the truth is, my friends, that we are spending a tremendous amount of money on this election. Now, I was hoping that a lot of that would not be all that effective. But, as it turns out, negative campaigning does work, and it worked to great effect in this one. There were a lot of races where it just seemed like the advertising was nonstop. And there was enough liberal groups that they could keep it up nonstop. There were Better Wyoming. They did a lot of work. WYO for Business, whomever those folks were. Common Sense Republicans for Wyoming. And the list is on and on. Not to exclude all of the nameless, faceless Facebook groups that showed up during the election. Now, I'm actually doing a study to try to figure out how many of those are going to stick around and how many of them are going to disappear into the ether. I think a lot of them are probably going to go away. Maybe. I don't know. But there's a lot of things that happened in this election that I think deserve some serious reflections. Now, Councilman Moody down in Cheyenne, he says that regroup for 2028 and need to do what AFP does to win. I would agree with you halfway on that one, Mark, just to say that I really dislike negative campaigning. But, when you're in an election, and let me give you an example here. I've got one in the stack of stuff. Where is it? Okay. So this is a great example. Representative Heiner lost to his opponent, Kenneth Roberts, in Lincoln County. So Kenneth Roberts is Lincoln County's clerk of district court, and he's the only guy. He's the only male clerk of court in the entire state. Unofficial results show that Sweetwater and Uinta County show Roberts received 1,118 votes to Heiner's 861. Roberts' home county made the difference. Heiner carried both of the district's other counties, beating Roberts 395 to 278 in Sweetwater and 196 to 110 in Uinta. But Roberts overwhelmed Heiner in Lincoln County 730 to 270. The victory puts Roberts on track to move from overseeing Lincoln's County District Court records to serving in the Wyoming House. Now, you can read this entire article, but it will not tell you the truth about that election. The truth is that Kenneth Roberts had a stroke, and he's been in the ICU. He was in, I don't know if he's still in the ICU, but he was in the ICU for the better part of the election. He wasn't able to go out and campaign, and he still won. But you don't see that anywhere in the Cow Pies article. Now, this is interesting because it's more than interesting. It's fascinating because it's proof positive that the media is not telling you the truth about any of these candidates, which is, by the way, this kind of opens up a giant doorway for me to walk through, which I'm absolutely going to do, by the way. But the media not once in this article does it say that Kenneth Roberts has some serious medical conditions, and a lot of people don't know if he's going to be able to serve. Anecdotally, I was told that his son showed up at debates to give an update on how his dad is doing. And of course, I wish Kenneth Roberts the best. I hope that he gets better. I'll say a prayer for him today. But he's not fit to serve. And Heiner got beat by a guy that has been in the hospital. Now, because that wasn't publicized, Roberts ended up winning the election. Now, the question is, had the media actually been honest and actually written an article that, this guy really did have a stroke and he was in the hospital, or, it was reported to me that it was a stroke. How's that? Would the election turned out differently? I would say, yeah. Now, Heiner is a member of the Freedom Caucus. He was the majority floor leader, and so he got the brunt of a lot of the criticism of what happened in the House of Representatives because he was in leadership. So yeah, it's poop rolls uphill. But part of the blame, at least in this race, rests on the media because they didn't report. And I didn't find out about this until way late. So, I mean, I think I found out about it like 2 days before the election. I was shocked that nobody told me about it. But think about that. I mean, the level, and it's not that that the cow pie lied about it, or that the media down in the southwest part of the state lied about it. They lied by omission. Now, a lie of omission is the same thing as, just overtly lying, but they didn't tell you the truth about that candidate. And the truth is, there's a better chance that the Republican Party in those 3 counties is going to have to get together and select 3 candidates for the county commissioners to choose from. That's probably what's going to happen, would be my guess. Now, I mean, there are other counties where similar things have happened, and that's been the case. But it is incumbent upon the media to tell you the truth. That's why in this whole program, I've been pretty darn critical of conservatives, because, I mean, with great defeat comes great reflection. And so if you don't do that, you're not going to win. One of the things, and you can see this at the national level, so the Democrats got pounded in the last election. Trump is the president. They don't have the House. They don't have the Senate. And yet none of them really want to do any sort of introspection and try to figure out why they lost the election. And now you see you have a bunch of Democrat socialists that are taking over the party. So why is that happening? Well, it's because I think there's a couple of reasons, but one of them is that the Democrats refuse to do any sort of analysis as to why they lost the election. And the second is that party has been abusing those folks for a really long time. They use the ground game of the Democratic Socialists because they're loud. In many cases, they're violent. And then when it comes to actually running for office, the Democrat Party pushed those folks aside and said, don't worry, we'll handle this. Well, now you're seeing the results of that. But had the Democrat Party engaged in any sort of analysis of why they're losing elections, they probably wouldn't have to go this far. But now you've got the guy up in Michigan who's running for the Senate that says that government needs to seize businesses. Yeah, I saw that headline this morning. You've got to have a sober analysis of what happened. And what happened is not good. Now let's look at the other side. Okay. Are we going to have 2 years that are a little bit rough? You bet. Like I said, that's why we need the red coat bingo card, so we can figure out, so we can maybe win a prize. Tell you what I'll do. Okay. So thinking about red coat bingo, I will make a conscious effort to get some Cowboy state politics swag, and we'll get some so a couple of small door prizes, whoever wins red coat bingo. I don't know how we're going to judge this. You're going to have to take a picture of your bingo card or something and send it to me. We'll figure out the rules later. But what's going to happen is in those 2 years, like I already said, the media is going to take a big jump to the left because they don't have to hide anymore. They don't have to lie about who they are. And so they're not going to report on, anything that the redcoats are doing. I will. This program will. The Open Range Record will. But they're going to do all sorts of things. Like, there's no reason for any of them to have a mask anymore. And so what you're going to see is a whole bunch of super liberal policies come out of Eric Barlow's office. We're not going to like any of them, probably. There might be a few that we're okay with. And as Patrick said, the libs are going to hang themselves with their own rope, but it will be an expensive 2 years. I think you're exactly right. And, I love, one of the reasons I love being in this studio is it's much easier for me to interact with you. I can see the comments. When we're in the downtown studio, there's a lot more going on. And, I don't have direct access to the comments, so I do here. But, it's going to be an interesting 2 years. And for those conservatives in the legislature, I got to say, it's probably not going to be that much fun. Just being completely honest. But there is, all you got to do is pay attention to what they're doing, listen to what they say. I was talking to a couple of people last night at Bible study. And, a couple of the comments was, I'm not going anywhere near Cheyenne for the next 2 years. Oh, buddy, I am. That's going to be a riot. I mean, it's okay. So we're going to be in the minority, but think about all of the crazy things that they're going to say. Think about all of this, all of the fun sound bites we're going to have. Think about all of the material that is going to be there. They are going to expose themselves to such a degree that all of their promises that they made during this election aren't going to be worth any more than a hill of beans. Now, again, it's going to take some strong conservatives to stand up and just continue to say no, no, no. And let's just think about the Senate for just a second. I saw Senator Pearson jumped on the feed. So in the Senate, pretty much there was only a couple of conservatives that were fighting. The rest of them pretty much went along with Slithers, Nethercott, and Bo Beitman, whose real name is Dennis. And the rest of them, they just pretty much fell in line. There were a couple of conservatives that continually fought and said, no, 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 no. And one of those was Senator Pearson. And if you see her, you need to run up and give her a big hug, because Senator Pearson, you're a fighter. I mean, for sure. And Senator Steinmetz, she did a good job too, fighting. So it is going to be a rough 2 years. However, it can also be a very useful 2 years, because, as Patrick aptly said, they're going to hang their own selves on their own petard, and we aren't going to have to work that hard to do it. Now, we're going to have to be vigilant and keeping track of what they do. We're going to have to make sure that our narrative is on point. We're going to have to work just as hard as the other side did to defeat us, and that is what it's going to take. So let's take our third break. And we'll continue when we come back to the program. I want to talk a little bit of national politics. I've got a couple of crazy videos of some people that are probably headed to Congress. And if we're not careful, that crap is coming here. So take a break, and we'll be back in a minute. Are you sick to death of being told what to think? Maybe you don't even realize that it's happening. Freedom Caucus bad, big spending, big government, liberal, Republican good. Conservatives are bad and they want to starve little children. I have heard it all, my friends. We are way past the time when the news was just the news, if it ever was. But wouldn't it be nice if you had a news platform that was at least honest about what they were telling you? News on the news page, opinion on the opinion page. That's exactly what the Open Range Record is. Go to the website, openrangerecord.com. News, analysis, opinion, and investigative journalism. One more time, that website is openrangerecord.com. You can listen and watch Cowboy State Politics live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble every Tuesday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pay attention to all that other block-headed, Borg-like so-called news if you want. But if you want to get the real story, watch Cowboy State Politics live. And now, back to the program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live, moving through a Thursday. Thank you for watching the program, my friends. I really appreciate it. You can ask Christine if you want. You guys take up a big, gigantic place in my heart, and it's so much fun to do what I do and get to talk to you every day. So thank you for watching. Thank you for everything you do for the show. All right, so let's kind of shift to some national news real quick, and there's some interesting things that happened in the the House and Senate race. Now, Harriet Hageman ran away with it. I mean, no doubt about it. She beat socialist Sam Mead by, I think it was like 37 points, something like that. Hold on, I had to get some more coffee going. But in my mind, there was no way that Harriet wasn't going to win that one. Sam Mead, donating to Bernie Sanders and Act Blue, and I mean, didn't stand a chance. But she does have a Democrat challenger, and this is from Wyopile, and I quote, let's see here. Currently, Wyoming's lone representative in the House, Hageman, won by a landslide in Tuesday's primary election for the Senate, 37 points. Harriet, let's see here. The Associated Press called the Republican primary for Hageman at 852 with 26% of the votes counted in, and Sam Mead is the runner-up. In the Democrat Party, AP called the race for James Byrd with 27% of the votes counted. Hageman said in a statement that she's grateful to the people of our great state for entrusting her with, blah, blah, blah. She emphasized keeping taxes low, which is interesting that that was Harriet's message. And yet the Republicans the red-coated Republicans, I see, it's hard. They campaigned on higher taxes. Quote, she says, in short, we're a nation of laws and accountability. We must make sure we continue to act like one. And we must aggressively defend freedom and capitalism, or we will descend into the dreary, soul-sapping, certain failure of communism. And it's funny. You see, there was a sponsored post that I did for the Wyoming Republican Party saying, look, there are DSA candidates winning. And you would not believe the comments. If you want to see something fascinating, go to the Cowboy State Politics Facebook page, look for that post. And I think it says something like, we're hearing from our members that the DSA candidates are winning. Go look at the comments. It's truly incredible how many people are absolutely in favor of communism and socialism. Now, 20 years ago, not even that, 10 years ago, I don't think that you would have that many people come out in the open and advocate for things like socialism. I mean, really, okay, so let's be very clear. Socialism, the difference between the two. In socialism, the government doesn't own the means of production. It controls them. So you may own your business, but the government tells you how to run it. That is just a pit stop on the way to full-blown communism. In communism, the government owns the means of production. Those are the only two differences. Okay, they both result in poverty. They both result in death. They both result in mass starvation, and both of them have been responsible for the deaths of hundreds of millions of people worldwide. And yet, there are people in the Cowboy State that continually advocate for that. Now, I've been watching politics for a long time, my friends. I've been doing Cowboy State politics for over 6 years, and I can tell you for a fact that what happens nationally usually takes at least a year before it comes here. In some cases, if it's one of these, like one exception to this was Black Lives Matter. Okay? So there was not a huge protest, Black Lives Matter thing in Wyoming, but it took like 3 months-ish before those protests started to happen here. Those are small things. The big things I'm talking about are the systemic questions, the systemic debates that we have, communism versus capitalism. Now, we've got Josh Durrell, who is the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council. He has said on multiple occasions that the free market doesn't work, that the free market is working against us, that the free market is just some idea at some ivory tower type institution. And so there are people at high levels of government in Wyoming that do believe that capitalism doesn't work. Okay, so that is one of the major tenets. Like, you have to believe that to be in favor of socialism and capitalism. So to make the argument that that sort of thing isn't happening here is just preposterous, because it is. And a lot of it, and we used to ascribe these things solely to the Democrat Party. And it's true. Most of the people that believe in socialism and communism are part of the Democrat Party. But now there are national groups who have always been around. The Democratic Socialists of America have always been around for a very, very long time. It's just they've been hiding for a long time. Now, there's no reason for them to hide, and you've got Senate candidates that are coming out and saying we need to seize the means of production. There's the mayor of New York who has said exactly the same thing. One of those guys who was in favor of socialism, though he wasn't very vocal about it, was Sam Mead. The nephew and great-grandson of two former Wyoming governors campaigned under the banner "Protecting Public Lands." That was the banner. But if you dug into the things that he said, in fact, on this program, I played you a soundbite of him saying that he didn't think that government-run healthcare was a bad thing. Quote, "I knew that this was going to be a pretty big challenge," said Meade on Tuesday evening. "I wanted to make huge improvements to the state and the country. To not have an opportunity to do that is disappointing." In July, the survey of likely GOP voters' taxes and government spending were listed by 14% of respondents as their top issue. Illegal immigration was the next important subject, listed by 13%, jobs in the economy 11%, and public lands as the last 11%. Jimmy Skogard, by the way, Jimmy, how do you like that 2.7% you got? Maybe you should have worked a little bit harder, or maybe you shouldn't have been so nasty to a lot of voters. Anyway, by the way, you're welcome on the program when you want to come back, and we can debate this whole thing again. He was on the show, and he didn't really like the reception he got because he said a bunch of things that weren't true about Agent 29 and about me. So, but I mean, give him credit. He has a lot more courage than Melissa Butcher, than Micah Sturdivant, than Ryan Koltiska, than a lot of redcoats that didn't want to come anywhere near this program. So in the Democrat Party, Byrd, a former state representative who served from 2009 to 2019, also rode the public lands bandwagon, criticizing Hageman, now his opponent in the November election, for what he characterized as an anti-conservation position, which is preposterous with Representative Hageman. If there is anybody in the U.S. Congress that has been advocating for pure conservation, it is Harriet Hageman. Now, what is the difference between conservation and preservation? Preservation is the stupid idea that comes from, it's always been around, but it was the Clinton administration that created the roadless rule. And that is that you can't have any roads in wilderness areas. Now, I like wilderness areas. In years past, I've done a lot of hiking. Some of the best times I can remember with my dad were, hiking in the wilderness area. But if you remove the ability to manage those lands, you exponentially increase the possibility of fires, right? If you remove the ability of humans to manage property or to manage wildlife or anything, with wildlife, it's easier to see because without managing a wildlife population, disease kicks in. And the Wyoming Game and Fish does an incredible job at managing our wildlife populations so that there is a sustainable animal population. Because if you don't, every species has its own version of disease. There's chronic wasting disease for ungulates, blue tongue. There's whirling disease for fish. There's a tularemia for rabbits. You ever notice how the rabbit population will boom, and then the next year you won't see a whole bunch of rabbits, and then maybe a year or two later there'll be bunnies everywhere? Well, one of those causes is tularemia. And so, like animal populations, if they get too big, disease. And so we manage them. We conserve them. Conservation is the responsible use of public resources. Preservation is removing all human contact from natural resources. Now, we saw a lot of that with the Biden administration with the Rock Springs Management Plan. That would have set aside millions and millions of acres from human contact. And they went so far as to say that if you owned property out in the middle of, a bunch of BLM, that you couldn't access it because you couldn't cross BLM property to access your own private property. And so that is the idea of preservation. It is Harriet Hageman who has, advocated for responsible use since I have known her. One of her big issues, one of the very first questions I asked her in one of the very first interviews was about grizzly bears, and she teed off on it. The truth is that the grizzly bear population has more than recovered. But it is stupid federal policy that has prevented Wyoming's Game and Fish from managing the grizzly bear population. I mean, the grizzly bears have, and I'm just going to take a stab in the dark and say they've at least doubled the population to where they would be considered not endangered anymore. And yet the federal government insists on keeping the grizzly bear on the endangered species list. And it's, it is a complete failure of, wildlife management. And so for Byrd to suggest that Harriet has not done a good job at conservation is absolutely an absurd argument. Let's see here. Let me continue. Where was I? Yeah. Okay, quote. I'd like to see better numbers, but I'll take the win, Byrd said Tuesday evening. We'll take a look at what worked and what didn't, what worked, and we will apply that on steroids. Byrd looks forward to running against Hageman on the issue of public lands. He said that's a loser, by the way. He's going to lose that argument, which rightfully so. The Democrats really don't have any good arguments. And actually, the Redcoats don't have good arguments either, but they were just better at pushing them on voters. Let's see here. Billy Benavidez, and I don't even know this guy. He's a greenskeeper from Sheridan and father of two, had to contend with the fact that he's on probation. And he was put on a year's unsupervised probation on August 20th. And I guess he was running in the race too, or he thought he was running. So really, and again, I bring up Byrd just to say that there is a Democratic opponent to Representative Hageman. But let me just show you what some of the people running for Congress in other states who are members of the Democrat Party have said. And in Florida, here we go. Here's the piece. Let's see here. See, I've just got all this, and I got all these articles and the stack of stuff. All right. So Florida DSA Senate candidates' crazy moments. Quotes Marxist cop killer, calls drag queen shows wholesome entertainment for children. Florida's Democratic Socialist of America Senate candidate, Angie Nixon, has a history of making outlandish statements. By the way, on Tuesday, she won her Democratic primary in Florida. So it is entirely possible that this person that I'm about to tell you about is going to be in Congress with Wyoming's senator. It's more than likely it's going to be Harriet Hageman. But this person will very likely share the floor with our senator. Let me just play the first video for you. In this one, this is the one where she says that, let me just find it here, that drag shows are wholesome entertainment. Watch this.
I don't understand, there's no sexualization at a drag show. It's just people dressing up and singing and performing. I've taken my children to drag shows and it's fun. It's entertainment. It's wholesome entertainment. Yes. And it's nothing wrong. It's just
nothing wrong.
I don't get it.
We don't get it either, why you're insisting that drag shows are wholesome entertainment. But just think about that. She is going to be she could very well be in the Senate. Now, I don't think that she's going to beat her Republican challenger, but it is Florida after all. And, where Wyoming took a dramatic shift to the left, Florida did not. So anyway, let's see here. Number one, the Florida state representative openly quoted a Marxist cop killer, Assata Shakur, when at one time appeared on the FBI's most wanted list. And I quote, here's what she said. I'm going to open this up for questions, but I'm going to leave y'all with these words of a famous freedom fighter before we open it up. Assata Shakur, Nixon said, quote, "It is our duty to fight for our freedom, and it is our duty to win. We must love and protect one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains." Yeah, he's a cop killer, and a Marxist one at that. What else? Let's see here. Number two. Nixon openly called for the return of DEI policies, asserting that, quote, "we must work to level the playing field." Now, DEI, okay, that was a big argument in the legislature. And by the way, a lot of the folks that won on Tuesday night in the House and the Senate, they were very much opposed to removing DEI policies at the University of Wyoming and in your local school districts. Quote, here's what she said. You have to just make sure that you're passing policies that work to level the playing field. I don't think there's anything wrong with DEI, with leveling the playing field. There's nothing wrong with that. Let me tell you what exactly is wrong with DEI. Everybody in this country has an equal opportunity to succeed. Nobody in this country is guaranteed equal outcomes. That's not how our country works. You have every opportunity to succeed just the same as the person next door. The question is, how much effort do you put in and how talented you are? The truth is, some people are not as talented as others. Every kid thinks that he is going to be a professional baseball player or professional football player. The reality is, only a very, very, very small percentage of them actually make it that far. Some people are more talented than others. Some people are better carpenters than others. Some people are better plumbers or electricians or engineers or doctors or surgeons. I guess a surgeon is a doctor. But some people are more skilled than others. But that does not mean that everybody doesn't have an equal opportunity to succeed. If you're not a good doctor, maybe you're good at something else. Maybe you just haven't found your field of expertise. Turns out I'm really good at this program. Other people, not so much, which is why this program is effective and others are not. It's why this program is successful and others are not. Just everybody has their own gift, and nobody is guaranteed the same outcome out of their gift. She went on to say, it's going to take me 20 more years or whatever to get caught up just based on my family history, right? And so, I would have just definitely say we got to stop the rollbacks of these anti-DEI measures and that same type of thing. Well, DEI type of stuff, just like affirmative action, results in things like the average grade being given out at Harvard of being an A. Can you believe that? There was a story, it's been a couple months ago, but 70% of the grades given out at Harvard were A's. Now, Harvard is supposed to be, it was at one time, the most elite school in the country. Now, not so much, as it turns out. Take a listen to this video, or watch this video of this woman talking about DEI. Check it out.
It wasn't equal because women have still been getting paid 80 something cents on the dollar of a white man. And so you definitely just have to work to level the playing field, and you gotta close these corporate tax loopholes. You have to put the DEI
that's a dirty word these
policies
days.
back in place.
God forbid, it's worse than some curse words these days.
Right. And then you actually have to just make sure that you are passing policies that work to level the playing field. I don't think there's anything wrong with DEI, with leveling the playing field. There's nothing wrong with that. Why do we not?
Okay, so it's not leveling the playing field that they're after. It's leveling the end score. That's the whole point in DEI, is not to say that everybody has an equal opportunity. It's to say that everybody gets an equal outcome. And so it's for the same reason that there were several universities that got sued because they were admitting people that just happened to have a different skin color than others who weren't nearly as qualified. And so a lot of people sued, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can't do that anymore, because this country is based on merit. And until we come to a realization that merit built this amazing America that we all get to live in, we're going to have to contend with senators just like that who are going to share the floor with our senator. And just take our senator, for example. Her nickname when she was a lawyer was the Wicked Witch of the West. She was a very, very effective natural resource lawyer. And it's all based on her skills. If you've ever, I love having Harriet Hageman on the show. It is always an enlightening experience. And it's not been too often that we've gone back and forth on a topic, but she's a very skilled litigator, very skilled at argumentation, very intimidating. I would not want to be on the receiving end of her, debating with her. I mean, I think it would be a heck of a lot of fun, but I definitely wouldn't want to be in front of her on a committee. She is more skilled at that than other legislators. the truth is, my friends, is that this amazing country that we live in was built on meritocracy. That the folks who are skilled and that work hard will be successful. And it is only in this country where that actually works. That if you work hard and if you're good at what you do, you will be a success. Now, there's no guarantee of how big of a success you will be, but if you work hard and you apply yourself, you will be successful in whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're a plumber or an electrician or if you're a public servant. If you work hard and you know the numbers and you know how your community works and you're good at making the argument, you will be successful. Or if you're an educator, if you know your subject matter better than anybody else and you work at your craft and you practice and you do it over and over and over again, you will be an effective teacher. And the same holds true for any occupation, anything in this country. Meritocracy and capitalism is what built the wealthiest, the most charitable, the most powerful, the country that has changed the living conditions of most of the world, the country that has come up with the most incredible technological advances. Most of them come from right here, ladies and gentlemen. There's this common lie that a lot of the technological advances that happen come from China or they come from Indonesia or Thailand or whatever. It's not true. Some of the greatest advances in technology have happened right here. Some of the greatest advances in medicine have happened right here. You know why? Because we have competition, because it is a meritocracy, because we believe in free market capitalism. All right, so it's true. We just went through an election where a lot of the folks that won do not believe in free markets, do not believe in competition, and do believe in things like DEI and leveling the playing field. None of that works, my friends. If you, if you try to do that, what you end up with is mediocrity. We turn from a meritocracy into a mediocrity. That is, everything's mediocre. It's the same thing holds true when you try to put artificial limits on anything. That's why I am a free market capitalist. I believe that the government ought to stay the heck out of it. And when we fund things like the Wyoming Business Council, which a lot of these people that got elected, I'm pointing to my stack of stuff, but it's really a lot of these people that got elected, they don't believe in that. They say that, well, we have to have the government run healthcare. We have to have the government run business. The Wyoming Business Council has to get involved and help businesses out. We have to create business development. The government needs to be more involved in education. That we have to have we can't have standards. We need all of these people to graduate. Well, the truth is, if you're shoveling people out the door, there's no guarantee that they're learning anything. They're going to come out being as dumb as a box of rocks because they're not forced to compete. It is competition, meritocracy, and free market capitalism that has created this amazing country that we live in. Now, we're confronted by a group of people in our legislature that most of them don't believe those things. And they don't believe that we should avoid policies that level the playing field or that advantage one group over another. That's another thing that liberals try to do all the time, is we set up artificial groups of people. I'm not saying the people are artificial. I'm saying the group is. And you hear this all the time. We have to have, gay rights. We have to have DEI rights. We have to have trans rights. Everybody has rights. Everybody does. Even all those people in those groups, they're the same rights as everybody else. And that, my friends, is what the left finds anathema. That it is an anathema to them, that everybody is equal, which the irony being, it's those folks that scream every other day, well, we're all equal. We have to have this group rights, we have to have trans rights and women's rights and all that. Well, the reality is all of those rights exist. Everybody has the same rights. But when you are pandering to a group of people for votes, when you are trying to advantage one group over another for your own little group's advantage, that's when everything gets out of tilt. Have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy? I mean, it's a ridiculous movie, but you will be shocked at I'll give you the plot line of it. So there's this mediocre guy. He's got like an 80 IQ or something, and he gets put in like this cryostasis chamber. and they forget about him. And he wakes up a whole bunch of years in the future. And when he wakes up, it's a society of stupid people. And he ends up being the most intelligent person around. And he's only, again, when he left, he's like a, kind of a, 80 IQ, barely above mediocre, not really all that smart. And when he wakes up, it's an entire society of idiotic people. And you will be amazed at the things that we have done that show up in that movie. And most of it is all based on these stupid DEI policies. So now let's get back to my original point with all of this. Are these things going to come to Wyoming? Well, I would argue that you already had a socialist candidate who was running for the U.S. Senate in Sam Mead. I mean, he openly said that he donated to Bernie Sanders. He said it was in favor of government-run health care. I don't know how much more evidence you absolutely need in that. But I think, and here's the thing, like politics is always downstream from culture. Like something changes in the culture, and our politics are always, and I didn't come up with that. That's Andrew Breitbart, by the way. But then politics reacts. Something happens here, and then it translates over here. And so what you're seeing is a culture that is, and maybe not in Wyoming, but in other states, that is overly dependent upon collectivism, that is overly dependent. And you got the mayor of New York saying we have to abandon the frigidity of rugged individualism. How amazing is that? Abandon the rigidity of rugged individualism and embrace the warmth of collectivism. Now, what is collectivism? Well, that's another word for socialism and communism. It's the idea that we all get together and that we all do it better as a group and that we have group rights. This is an individualistic country, my friends, that you as an individual can succeed on your own. You don't need to be part of one group or another. That you can do it all on your own and everybody has the equal opportunity to it. But the truth is that collectivism is responsible for some of the greatest horrors of mankind. On the podcast, every time I run into somebody that lived under communism, I make it a point to reach out to them and interview them, just so that we have a record of what it's actually like to live in under socialism and communism. And there's a number of episodes I've done. Ovi Muntean lived in communist Romania. Charlie Cole spent some time in the Soviet Union. My friend Maylene Salabaria, she lived in communist Cuba. And I mean, there are others. I think I've done like Peter Fidenka. There's another interesting interview. He lived in Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia when they were communist. Another very interesting interview. But I make it a point just to show you what socialism and collectivism looks like, because it all sounds great now. We'll have free buses and government run grocery stores, but the end result of that is horror, misery, and death. And I know that sounds outrageous to say right now, but just think about the policies. I mean, there are folks. The guy up in Michigan that's probably going to win the Senate race. He openly says that the government needs to seize the means of production. Now, just look at our education system. So, we focus on graduation rates, and we say that, all these tests, they're standing in the way. And I would argue that, yes, in some cases, all the testing doesn't allow teachers to do what they do best, is teach. But when the emphasis is placed on graduation rates and not on actually teaching the kids what they need to know, you end up with a bunch of little drones. And the majority of teachers that we get in this state come from the University of Wyoming. The University of Wyoming is one of the most liberal schools in the country as far as state universities go. If you don't believe me, go take a trip to Laramie and walk through the campus. You'll see all sorts of LGBTQ, ZXP, WDS paraphernalia around. There's a lot of classes on, and one of my favorite sound bites from Ken is when he's talking about ecofeminism and global justice and social justice. And I mean, there are entire programs at our university that are focused on those things. And so when a teacher leaves the university and they go to, they get hired in, Wheatland or in Torrington, well, where did they come from? Well, they came from the University of Wyoming. And while they may not be teaching those policies, they're teaching from that perspective. And so those influences, I had a class in college. We had to take when I was at Regis University, I had to take a sociology class. So I just picked one. And the teacher ended up being this radical socialist. And interestingly enough, it was the classic scenario of you got one conservative student in the class and the rest of them are a bunch of red beret, Che t-shirt wearing communists. And I was the guy in the back of the classroom going, yeah, but what about capitalism? And, so even I had that experience. Well, if you're not, if you get indoctrinated in that type of thinking, even though you may not be teaching that communism is great, you're coming from that framework. Let me give you another example. When I lived in Virginia, one of the stepkids brought home their history book. Actually, I asked her to bring home the history book. And what I found in that book was about 15 pages about communism and the 1917 Russian Revolution. You know how many pages I found about the American Revolution? One. And not even a front and back page. It was just one about the American Revolution. I would argue that the American Revolution was far more, and it's way more important than any socialist or communist revolution, in that it was the first time in the history of the world that men decided that they could rule themselves. The reason it was called the American experiment, because every other place in the world had a king or a czar or a potentate or, an oligarchy or it was a pure democracy. And, in Greece, of course, that was a lot, way before our revolution. But every other place had a ruler of some kind. And these crazy Americans say, you know what? I think men can rule themselves. I think they can vote. They think they can choose their own representatives, and I think we're going to have a country that is based on meritocracy. The rest of the world looked at us as if we were nuts. And now, here we are, 250 years later, and we have the longest-running constitution in all of the world. And think about all of the great things that it has accomplished. But at the same time, we have people using that exact amazing system, which, by the way, Ben Franklin said this is the worst possible system that you could have of government. But it's the best one that we've found yet. But think about that. All of these people that grew up in America, where even the poorest among us are vastly more wealthy than 90% of the world. Even the poorest people in our country probably have a cell phone and they have a pair of tennis shoes. That makes them way more wealthy than most of the rest of the world. A lot of the poor people in this world can go to Starbucks and buy a $5, well, it's probably not a $5 coffee, but go buy a really expensive cup of coffee. The rest of the world, they'll be lucky if they make $5 a month. And that is true for large portions of this world. So when you have candidates that are saying crazy things like, well, we need to have, we need to have collectivism and DEI and we need to have more government health care, and we need to have more government intervention in the free market, and we need to have more government programs. That, my friends, is the road to collectivism. That we have to have all of these government programs and that they will do everything for you and you don't have to do a darn thing. There's one terminal result out of all of that, my friends, and none of it is good. So here is the solution. I hate to, be the black rain cloud at the end of the program and say, look at all this bad stuff and not have a solution for you. Here's the solution. Get educated. Pay attention to what these elected people are doing. Conservatism did not fail in this election. Conservatism never fails. The principles endure. Now, maybe the candidates didn't do so good, but it wasn't conservatism that failed. It was the candidates. It was our messaging. There's a number of different things, but the principles are timeless truths. That is what the Republican Party platform is about. Meritocracy, free market capitalism, individual rights, personal responsibility, family values, God at the center of all of it. Those are the things that endure. And so long as you focus on those, you're not going to lose on the other side. You just got to be able to make the argument. And again, everybody has an equal opportunity to make that argument. It's just that some people are better at it than others. But what you do from here on out is that you pay attention to what these people do in Cheyenne and in Washington, D.C. Pay attention to their votes, listen to what they say, and believe what they say. When something crazy like this comes out.
I think you got to stop and take a look at what you're doing here. I speak against this because it kind of reminds me of that fairy tale, Cinderella.
Yeah. You know what he was talking about there? Is that you actually have to pay for the things that you vote for. That's not out of your pocket, but you have to have funding before you vote on something else. If you want to add an amendment that spends money, that you got to account for it somewhere else. That is what Bill Henderson was referring to. There's the soundbite from Nancy Case, who, by the way, just won re-election again. By the way, you're going to see Medicaid expansion come up again. He's the guy that said this is a great deal for Wyoming. It could be a great deal, but we can't even start to figure it out until we pass this bill. Yeah, we got to pass the bill to find out what's in it. He just won re-election, my friends. Believe what they say. Believe how they vote. And that's the way that we get out of this. Is it going to be a rough couple of years? Yep. But there's going to be a heck of a lot of laughs leading up to it. And if we pay attention to it, if we do our work, if we apply ourselves, we will be successful. And if we rely on God and conservative principles, and those two are pretty well intertwined, we're going to win in the end. It's just going to be a rough couple of years. All right, my friends. Well, that'll pretty much do it for today's installment of the program. Thank you for watching. This has been a riot today, and I'll see you again tomorrow. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow, my friends. Have a good afternoon.